Hello everyone, welcome to the program. Today we'll be doing something a little different, taking a look at one of the most controversial anime of 2004, Elfen Lied. In this program, a young man named Kuta returns to the city of Kamakura to attend college. His cousin, Yuka, felt so excited to see him that she ends up taking Kuta to the beach, the same one they used to visit as children. All of a sudden, though, their situation becomes far more serious than expected, all because of a naked, pink-haired girl with horns standing in the water. This stranger doesn't seem to know where or who she is, and she can't really talk either. All she can do is communicate with a single phrase, the word Nyu. That's N-Y-U. And the difference is more than just her red eyes, pink hair, and protruding horns. She is what is known throughout the series as a diclonii, a new race of human armed with invisible hands that can be used to kill. Nyu was being held captive at a secret government facility until she escaped. Now, the agency won't be capturing her again, instead planning to track her down for extermination. As complicated as this story becomes, Elfen Lied does an excellent job explaining all the tedious supernatural stuff while still allowing for an intensely emotional and violent animated series. Now, while there's plenty to like about Elfen Lied, from its captivating narrative to the impressive visuals, it's a show that also has a lot of flaws in terms of the moral message it tries to share. For one, Nyu's relationship with Yuka and Kuta is held in stark contrast with the secret agency. While treated lovingly by these two young adults, the facility she was held captive in was totally void of these more comforting, pleasant aspects of human life.
Never sneak up behind me, stupid bitch. He's perfect.
Now, while there's nothing wrong with this narrative contrast in of itself, the story does become problematic when even the weirder stuff that Kuta does is still framed as being totally acceptable. Take, for example, Nyu pushing her breast against Kuta's hand. Kuta definitely seems uncomfortable, but he doesn't resist either. And frankly, it's hard not to hold Kuta responsible for allowing this incident to continue as long as it does. Instead of pushing Nyu away like a responsible adult should, he lets it happen, at least until Yuka catches him.
It wasn't me! I swear, you started it!
In another scene, Kuta attempts to change Nyu's clothing, struggling along the way because of her sexy body. If Kuta felt nervous about changing Nyu's clothes, though, then he shouldn't have done it in the first place. Plain and simple. He could have waited until Yuka got home, then called her to come help. Instead, Yuka catches him red-handed, again, and she's totally pissed. Kuta, however, tries to defend himself by saying that he wasn't trying anything sexual, which is totally true.
Like I said, you misunderstood.
The show makes it painfully clear how uncomfortable he was, and that he was just trying to help. The problem is, in the real world, we wouldn't have the benefit of knowing what Kuta was thinking. In reality, Yuka would have every right to be mad at him, and yet, even after this scene, she still has a crush on him.
Hey, Koda?
Hmm?
Do you remember the festival? The one we always went to when we were kids? Do you remember?
The festival? What are you talking about? Come on, that hardly seems important right now.
You jerk!
Yuka.
Ever since, I've been...
Yuka?
You're such a jerk!
Yuka, hold on! What was all that about?
In this way, I completely disagree with how Elfen Lied presented these events, portraying them as charmingly innocent and ultimately positive, instead of considering that Kuta shouldn't be acting in any sexual capacity with regard to a mentally impaired woman. And while these scenes feel charming in the moment, I would not feel comfortable with anyone acting this way in the real world. So while Kuta is not a force of evil, Like the secret agency chasing Mew, he's not exactly a responsible or trustworthy person either. By its very design, Elfen Lied uses romance and comedy to undercut any logical criticism the audience might have. The story doesn't tell the audience that Kuta did something wrong. Rather, it tells us that Kuta did something embarrassing, something funny that, ultimately, shouldn't be held against him.
I wonder who taught you to act so freaky. Yeah, okay. I wonder what's going on.
Please keep in mind, however, the original creator of Elfen Lied may not have thought too deeply about the implications of his story. In one interview, manga producer Lin Okamoto stated that his use of psychological states and social messaging were simply intended to further the plot and character development. His concerns were not with speaking on, defying, or defining social expectations, but with building a compelling narrative. That said, a moral or social message can still be communicated by any piece of entertainment, whether it's intended or not. This is actually a specific form of media analysis called death of the author, a term coined by theorist Roland Barthes, stating that the author's intentions don't really matter when interpreting their work. To Barthes, the content and form of a piece speak for itself.
It doesn't work, even when you wind it. I'm pretty sure it's broken.
Too bad.
What's wrong? What? Well,
Huh?
what's the matter?
Yuka, on the other hand, is criticized constantly throughout the series, even when her mistakes amount to nothing more than just being self-centered. To clarify, she is deeply in love with Kuta. It's the main reason she was looking forward to seeing him again. She ends up becoming very insecure, however, as a result of Kuta and Mew's budding romance, even going so far as to voice her concern that Kuta is giving this strange girl more attention than her.
Do you want to touch me? Like you touched Mew?
I told you already, what you saw, that was something new started.
Keep in mind, at this point in the story, Mew had run off for the second time. To the audience, it's obvious that Yuka is terribly self-centered, that she's being unreasonable as a result of her fear and jealousy. These traits ultimately make Yuka unlikable, and while it's totally fine for a woman to be portrayed as self-centered, overbearing, and unlikable, I find it odd that the series never takes into account how Kuta might in fact be at least a little responsible for her unhappiness. For instance, Yuka ends up kissing Kuta during episode 6, Innermost Feelings. The scene cuts to another plotline for a moment, but when it returns to them, they're still kissing, and Kuta doesn't express any problem with this. As far as Yuka knows, Kuta accepted her kiss and likes her back. And yet, later in the series, Kuta also ends up kissing Mew, fulfilling their childhood romance in a way that Kuta just didn't share with Yuka. Why he even allowed Yuka to kiss him earlier, without ever mentioning that he liked someone else, is never explained. He could have said that he had a change of heart, that yes, he liked Yuka, but he decided that his heart belongs to Mew. Instead of acknowledging Kuta's lack of communication here, though, the narrative instead becomes, Yuka is just a crazy, immature girl who can't handle rejection. And while this is true to an extent, Kuta still holds some responsibility, and yet the story never holds him accountable. There are other aspects of this show that I find questionable. For instance, Yuka and Kuta end up allowing a 13-year-old girl to live with them, named Mayu. While there's nothing wrong with this at face value, and the story sufficiently explains how and why this happened, the flashbacks depicting Mayu's sexual abuse by her father are extremely graphic, and in my opinion, serve only to intensify the entertainment value of this program. As horrible as these events are, and the show does depict her abuse as absolutely horrific, there are many points in Elfen Lied where I can't help but wonder if this is more about entertaining the audience than it is about creating a narrative that's sympathetic to victims of abuse. While there are pieces of information here and there to help the audience connect emotionally with the victims, Elfen Lied still represents their personalities as for the most part, defined by their abuse and emotional fragility. I would not call this story a positive or introspective account of abuse survivors. Instead, the victims are represented as just that, victims, completely focused on their youth and innocence rather than any distinct character traits. In the eyes of Elfen Lied, the sole desire of abuse victims is to find parents like Kuta and Yuka who simply won't continue their suffering. And while building positive relationships is absolutely a part of the healing process, glorifying Kuta and Yuka's role in this only serves to damage the credibility of this story. Is Elfen Lied about the victims, or is it about Kuta putting himself in danger and later being rewarded with romance and positive relationships? To me, it seems that Elfen Lied basically turns abuse into a video game, something for the audience to experience purely for entertainment, with the illusion of a deeper message. Though enchanting and at times awe-inspiring, I cannot recommend Elfen Lied as a diligent depiction of abuse survival. As kind as Kuta is supposed to be, as loving as Mayu, Nana, and Miu are, I don't feel like these individuals have distinct personalities, feeling more like caricatures in just another fantasy story. With that said, there's a lot to like about Elfen Lied, and while there's also much to be improved upon, other shows like Stranger Things have managed to tell a similar story while making significant improvements in terms of believability and characterization. In the end, I feel like Elfen Lied was, at the very least, a step in the right direction, and though there's much to criticize, I do believe that other, more thoughtful programs would not have existed if Elfen Lied hadn't led the way. Anyway, that's going to be all for today. Please let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, and honestly, I'm still conflicted about what I think of this show. Some shows never feel the same way twice, and Elfen Lied is absolutely one of them. Anyways, I hope you stay safe, take care, and have a wonderful week.